I want you to take a second and actually picture what artificial intelligence physically looks like, if you close your eyes right now.
Yeah, most people probably just imagine like glowing lines of code or maybe some weightless data clouds floating somewhere up in the ether.
Right, exactly. Or just a really sleek software interface on your phone, because we've been so trained to think of the internet, and especially AI, as this invisible, almost magical
Oh,
force.
absolutely. I mean, it is the ultimate abstraction. We literally call it the cloud, specifically so we don't have to think about the actual plumbing behind it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. For you, the learner listening to us today, our mission is to basically rip up the floorboards and look directly at that plumbing.
Which is fascinating because the plumbing is getting a massive upgrade right now.
It really is. We are exploring the literal physical backbone of the AI revolution. We're talking glass, light, lasers, and just massive optical networks. And to understand how this whole boom is actively rewriting the physical architecture of the global internet, we have an incredible case study today.
Yeah, a really timely one too.
Exactly. We are diving into sources released literally today, June 4, 2026. Specifically, Ciena Corporation's fiscal Q2 2026 earnings presentation, along with, excerpts from their corresponding financial report.
And for those who might not know, Ciena is essentially the company laying down the tracks for this new digital railroad. I mean, they are a massive, massive player in high-speed optical networking.
Right. So looking at their second quarter results gives us this perfect front row seat to the sheer scale of the capital being deployed to make AI possible, and more importantly, the physical bottlenecks that are threatening to slow it down.
Because there are definite bottlenecks.
Yeah.
The hardware simply has to catch up to the software.
Yeah, and before we look at the actual mechanics of Ciena's specific money-making engine, I think we really need to grasp the tidal waves of data they are attempting to manage. Because there is a growing and frankly staggering divide between what you and I do on the internet and what AI does on the internet.
That divergence in growth rates is, well, it's basically the defining metric of this decade. I mean, if you look at standard user consumption bandwidth,
Like me streaming a 4K movie or sending an email.
exactly, you streaming, hosting a video call, whatever,
Yeah.
that is growing at a healthy 15% compound annual growth rate, or HHR, between 2025 and 2029.
Okay, so 15%. That's a solid, predictable upward curve.
Right. It's manageable.
Yeah.
But then you look at AI network traffic over that exact same period. It is growing at a blistering 36% COGR.
Wow. 36%.
Yeah, and that is just the general network traffic. If you look at data center bandwidth, so the data moving around internally and between the AI facilities themselves, that is growing at a 35% CAGR. And its capacity is already a staggering 50 times the capacity of general network bandwidth.
Wait, 50 times? Let me try to put that 50 times multiplier into perspective for a second. So traditional internet traffic is like a steady stream of commuter cars on a highway.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
It grows a little every year. A city planner adds a lane here or there, and the system just, functions. But this AI data center traffic is like waking up one morning and realizing an entire armada of massive million-ton bullet trains suddenly needs to use your local highway system.
Oh, man. Yeah, they just crush the asphalt.
Exactly. You can't just paint a new lane for that. You need completely new, ultra-wide tracks built entirely from scratch, massive new stations to house them, a totally different power grid just to run them.
That visual perfectly captures the reality of what we call the AI factory,
Yeah.
because a traditional cloud data center was essentially just a storage locker and a web host.
Right. You request a file, it sends you the file. Pretty simple.
Exactly. But an AI factory is entirely different. When hyperscalers, the massive cloud providers like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, when they train a new AI model, they aren't just storing static data.
Right. They're crunching it.
They're constantly shuffling petabytes of data back and forth across thousands of graphics processing units or GPUs simultaneously. I mean, these chips have to calculate probabilities and share those calculations with every single other chip in the cluster at light speed.
Meaning if they can't share that data fast enough, the whole billion-dollar supercomputer just, sits there waiting, idling while burning massive amounts of electricity.
That is exactly what happens. The compute power, the brains of the AI, is completely useless if the optical network, which is the nervous system, cannot deliver the data fast enough. This specific type of parallel computing just requires unprecedented physical bandwidth.
Which brings us to the funding, because keeping with that analogy, who is buying the land, laying the new ultra-wide rail, and building these massive stations?
Mhm.
It's the hyperscalers.
And they have deep, deep pockets.
Seriously. The scale of this capital deployment is just hard to wrap your head around. If you look at the cloud provider capital expenditure forecasts, financial analysts have consistently underestimated the spend, like year after year.
They really have. The numbers just keep getting revised upward.
Right. In 2024, it was $435 billion. In 2025, it was revised up to $600 billion. And now, for 2026, it is projected to hit $1.1 trillion.
To the T.
Yes, $1.1 trillion. And by 2030, the forecast is $1.7 trillion.
Well, when ChatGPT launched a few years ago, it really acted as a starter pistol for the whole industry. I mean, every major cloud provider suddenly realized that if they did not build the physical infrastructure to host the next generation of generative AI, they would permanently lose the arms race.
It was an existential threat for them.
Absolutely. So that $1.1 trillion is not just going into software development. It's going into buying actual land, securing industrial power contracts, building liquid cooling systems, buying silicon chips, and crucially, the high-speed optical networking required to tie it all together.
Okay, so with a $1.1 trillion budget just floating around the ecosystem, it makes sense to look at exactly how much of that is flowing directly into Ciena's pockets, because their Q2 2026 financial report is just an absolute masterclass in capturing infrastructure spending.
Oh, the top-line numbers show a company completely capitalizing on a massive demand cycle. Total revenue hit a record $1.57 billion for the quarter.
Which is up, what, 40% year over year?
Yep, 40% year-over-year growth.
That's wild. And the report pinpoints the exact growth engine. It's those hyperscalers. Cloud provider revenue now makes up 46% of Ciena's total revenue. And that specific segment jumped an incredible 70% year over year.
70% is huge. But while revenue growth of that magnitude is impressive for a hardware company, the profitability metrics actually reveal the true leverage in their business model right now.
Yeah, let's talk margins.
Okay, so their adjusted gross margin increased to 44.9%. That is a jump of 390 basis points, which translates to a 3.9 percentage point increase. But the standout figure is really their adjusted operating margin.
Oh, I saw this. That leaped 11,130 basis points, which, for those of you not staring at financial terminals all day, means a massive 11.3 percentage point jump, landing at 19.5%.
Right. And you have to understand, when a company operating in physical hardware nearly doubles its operating margin profile in a single year, it signals two very important things.
Okay, what are they?
First, they have achieved massive scale efficiencies in their manufacturing. And second, they possess intense pricing power. They are selling premium, high-demand products that buyers are just willing to pay top dollar for, basically because they have no other choice.
And that flows straight down to the bottom line, right? Adjusted earnings per share skyrocketed 290% to $1.64. I mean, a year ago, it was just 42 cents.
And their free cash flow hit $219 million, up 71%. They are just generating a ton of cash right now.
They're also seeing significant international expansion. The report mentioned revenue in India more than doubled year over year, driven by what they call MOFN mobile optical fiber network deployments.
Which, if you think about the global landscape, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because India is rushing to connect over 1 billion mobile users to 5G networks. And you cannot run a 5G wireless cell tower without a massive physical fiber backbone, the MOFN literally buried in the ground to carry all that wireless traffic back to the core network.
Exactly. The wireless network still relies entirely on buried wires. And in addition to funding all that global expansion, Ciena is actively returning value to shareholders. They repurchased $83 million in shares this quarter.
Wow, so that brings their total up to nearly $500 million under their current $1 billion buyback program, right?
Correct. It's a classic move management uses to signal their confidence in, long-term value creation.
Wait, I have to pause here and look at the underlying mechanics. Because taking these explosive margins and this 70% jump in cloud revenue, I have to ask, is this just a temporary panic buy?
What do you mean by panic buy?
Like an enterprise version of everyone hoarding supplies a few years ago. But instead of paper goods, tech giants are just hoarding optical switches because they're terrified of falling behind. Or does this represent a structural, permanent shift in how profitable Ciena can actually be?
That is the million-dollar question. And to answer that, we really have to analyze the fundamental shift in Ciena's customer base. because historically companies laying optical fiber sold primarily to traditional telecom service providers.
So your standard phone and internet companies.
Right. And telecoms are notoriously cyclical with their spending. They negotiate incredibly aggressively on unit price, and they often stretch out their payment terms as long as physically possible just to protect their own cash flow.
Ah, okay. So shifting from legacy telecoms to cash-rich cloud providers literally changes the accounting reality of the entire business.
Exactly. Hyperscalers operate on a completely different wavelength. They prioritize raw speed and technological performance over squeezing every last penny out of a vendor contract. Remarkably, they actually pay their bills on time.
Which accelerates the entire cash conversion cycle. I noticed in the financial report you see Ciena's days sales outstanding, which is the metric showing how long it takes to collect cash after a sale is made. It dropped from 87 days down to 71 days.
That's a huge improvement. And simultaneously, their inventory turns increased from 2.5 times to 3.6 times.
Meaning they're clearing out their warehouses and shipping physical product significantly faster than they used to.
Yes, exactly. So they are moving product faster, getting paid faster by richer clients who are buying their absolute highest margin, most advanced technology. That points heavily to a structural baseline shift in their profitability rather than just a one-off panic buy.
Okay, here is where it gets incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
Record margins like that, they just don't happen in a competitive vacuum. They happen because a company is selling a technological capability that nobody else can provide at that scale.
Right, you need a serious moat.
So let's examine the actual hardware driving this revenue wave, because Ciena's market dominance is staggering.
Oh, it is. They currently hold the #1 market share position globally, excluding China, in data center interconnect, total optical networking, and submarine networks.
So they're number one in connecting data centers on land, and they are number one in laying the cables under the ocean.
Yep. And that dominance is really anchored by a few specific product lines. Their reconfigurable line system, or RLS, and their wave server platforms both saw revenue grow more than 50% year over year.
But the crown jewel driving the future is their proprietary optical chips, right?
Like
Specifically the WaveLogic 6 or WL6 Extreme.
the WL6 Extreme is an absolute game changer.
The earnings presentation highlights they now have 110 customers for it, adding 20 just in the second quarter alone. What is actually happening inside this chip that makes it so indispensable to a hyperscaler?
Well, it relies on a technology called coherent optics. So imagine when you push massive amounts of data, which is represented by actual light down, a tiny strand of glass fiber over incredibly long distances.
Okay, light in a glass tube.
Right. But eventually, the physics of light start working against you. The light signals start to blur, they spread out, and they begin to interfere with each other. It's a phenomenon known as chromatic dispersion.
It basically gets fuzzy.
Exactly. And coherent optics use highly advanced digital signal processing chips to essentially untangle that blurred light.
Oh, so it's like noise-canceling headphones, but for light beams instead of sound waves.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it, actually. Yes. The digital signal processor mathematically corrects the distortion on the fly, which allows you to send colossal amounts of data over thousands of miles without the signal just turning into unreadable noise.
And the WL6 Extreme is just the bleeding edge of that specific technology.
Absolutely. It's the best digital signal processing out there for this application.
And hyperscalers are using that specific tech for something the report calls scale across and the RLS hyperrail, which the report noted Ciena just won the industry's first hyperscaler multi-rail opportunity.
Which is a massive win.
From my reading, this scale-across concept solves a massive physical problem with the actual power grid. Like, you literally cannot build a single data center big enough or supply it with enough electricity to train the next generation of AI models.
Oh no, a massive AI factory could require multiple gigawatts of power. It would literally melt the local municipal power grid.
Wow. So the power density required in a single location is just simply unattainable in most parts of the world.
Yeah, no city is going to let you pull that much juice.
So instead of building one giant 5-gigawatt data center, a hyperscaler is forced to, build 5 separate 1-gigawatt data centers geographically separated from each other out where power is actually available.
That's exactly the workaround. But here's the catch. To train the AI model effectively, those separated facilities still have to act as one single unified supercomputer.
And to make physically distant buildings act as one supercomputer, the data has to travel between them with near zero latency. which is the function of the RLS hyperrail.
You've got it. That's the hyperrail.
Let me return to our highway analogy. If standard data center connections are a two-lane road, a hyperrail is a dedicated, multi-lane, high-speed optical highway built exclusively for the brains of the AI.
Right. No commuter traffic allowed.
It uses multiple fiber pairs running in parallel, completely bypassing regular internet traffic, ensuring that the GPUs in a facility in, say, Ohio, can talk to the GPUs in a facility in Virginia as if they were sitting in the exact same server rack.
And securing the industry's first multi-rail opportunity with a major cloud provider, that acts as a massive validation of Ciena's technology. I mean, it proves to the rest of the market that they are the primary vendor capable of building those dedicated highways.
But they aren't just connecting data centers across state lines, they are also moving deeper into the buildings themselves. The presentation highlights a push, quote, in and around the data center with a technology called DSOM.
Which stands for direct optical connections.
Right. And they are systematically replacing traditional copper cables with fiber optic cables directly between the AI compute chips themselves.
And this represents a critical, frankly unavoidable technological pivot for the entire computing industry.
Yeah.
Because for decades, the short connections inside the server racks, the wires running just a few feet between the chips, those were always copper.
Sure, because copper is cheap, it's reliable, it's easy to work with.
Exactly. But the AI revolution is hitting the hard limits of basic physics.
Wait, really? Because if you push a terabit of data through a physical piece of copper wire, the electrical resistance alone must be generating an incredible amount of heat. Are we literally hitting the thermal limits of metal inside the server rack?
We absolutely are. As data transmission speeds march from 400 gigabit to 800 gigabit and now strictly require 1.6 terabit speeds for the next generation of AI, copper just flat out fails.
It just can't handle the load.
Right. At 1.6 terabits per second, a physical phenomenon called the skin effect takes over. Basically, the electrical signal gets pushed to the extreme outer edge of the copper wire, electrical resistance spikes dramatically, massive amounts of heat are generated, and the signal just degrades into useless noise over incredibly short distances.
Short meaning what?
We're talking mere meters.
Wow. So you literally cannot get the data from one side of a large server room to the other side using copper at 1.6 terabits without the signal dying or the cable requiring so much power it essentially becomes a fire hazard.
The resistance is simply too great. So the only physical solution left is to convert those electrical signals into light right at the chip level and send them over glass fiber using coherent optics. Because light runs cooler, it uses a fraction of the power and the signal stays perfectly intact.
And this is where Ciena's historical moat becomes incredibly valuable.
Oh, completely. Because they have spent over a decade perfecting coherent optics for massive submarine cables sitting at the bottom of the ocean. So they are perfectly positioned to miniaturize that exact same technology and drop it directly into the data center rack.
That makes so much sense. But here is the catch. Ciena has clearly built a multi-billion-dollar moat, dominating both the long-haul cables under the ocean and the short-hop connections inside the AI factory. So there is a single line buried in their executive summary that shows why this entire hardware revolution could face a serious bottleneck.
Yeah, we have to look at the macro environment.
Let's look at what management is projecting for the rest of 2026 and the macro risks that could derail this momentum.
Well, the immediate business outlook remains highly optimistic. For their fiscal Q3 2026, they're projecting revenue of $1.625 billion, give or take $50 million, and maintaining that 45% adjusted gross margin. And for the full year 2026, they're forecasting $6.3 billion in total revenue.
Yet right there in the executive summary, it explicitly states, quote, demand is outstripping supply, resulting in multi-year visibility and longer lead times.
Right, and multi-year visibility is a dream scenario for investors. It means you know your customers want to buy everything you can physically manufacture for the next 2 years.
But the longer lead times part.
Yeah, longer lead times is the ultimate double-edged sword in hardware. It means you are bottlenecked. A company can only grow exactly as fast as its physical supply chain allows.
And that reality brings us to the 4 key assumptions underlying Ciena's future outlook. Let me run through them. 1. Cloud providers must keep spending on AI at their current committed levels. 2. Supply chains for optical components and substrates must remain stable. 3. There can be no material changes to U.S. and international trade and tariff policies. And 4. Foreign exchange rates need to stay consistent.
I mean, looking at the world right now, those are significant, highly vulnerable assumptions.
They really are. It makes you realize that if demand is already outstripping supply and the entire ecosystem relies heavily on perfectly stable global supply chains and zero new international tariffs, how fragile is this $1.1 trillion AI build-out really?
Extremely fragile.
It feels like we are balancing a trillion-dollar software revolution on a knife edge of global logistics. Because software scales infinitely and almost instantly. But hardware requires cargo ships.
It highlights the stark contrast between the promise of software and the reality of atoms. No matter how advanced the AI algorithms get, no matter how brilliantly the large language models are coded, the entire revolution is entirely bottlenecked by physical reality.
By the availability of raw materials.
Yes. Think about their second assumption regarding substrates.
Yeah.
A substrate is the physical base material, often specialized silicon or glass, upon which these complex optical chips are actually built.
Right.
If a single specialized factory in another country goes offline, or if a new tariff hits those specific raw materials, the cost of the AI factory goes up, and the lead time for building a hyperrail extends from 6 months to a year.
So the $1.7 trillion AI build-out ends up sitting there waiting on a $5 piece of glass and silicon.
Exactly. Ciena's continued success, and honestly the AI boom itself, is completely tied to a fragile global ballet of manufacturing and heavy industry.
It is a really sobering perspective. We tend to assume the AI revolution is this inevitable digital wave, but it actually requires thousands of physical cargo ships to arrive at port on time every single time.
It's all atoms at the end of the day.
Well, to summarize what we have unpacked today for you listening, the AI revolution isn't just a story about smarter software. It is driving a massive trillion-dollar physical infrastructure boom.
The physical build-out is just unprecedented.
We are transitioning from a world built for traditional internet traffic to the era of the AI factory, requiring 50 times the bandwidth just to function. And Ciena Corporation is positioned right at the choke point of this data explosion.
Right at the center of it.
Their record Q2 2026 revenue, their massive margin expansion, and their structural shift toward cash-rich hyperscaler clients show a company dominating the physical build-out. Through high-speed optical networks, dedicated hyperrails, and the necessary transition away from melting copper cables, they have effectively translated the abstract demand for artificial intelligence into tangible, highly profitable hardware deployment.
It's a masterclass, really.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We talked at the very beginning about how we naturally conceptualize artificial intelligence as a cloud, right? A weightless, invisible entity.
Yeah, that magical abstraction.
But based on Ciena's explosive growth and the desperate need to connect power-hungry data centers across vast distances just to train these models, what if the ultimate limiting factor to human AI advancement isn't the brilliance of the code? What if it isn't even the processing power of the GPU chips? What if the ceiling on artificial intelligence is simply how much raw glass fiber we can physically lay in the dirt and light up with lasers to connect these supercomputers together?
That's a fascinating constraint to think about.
In the telecom industry, they talk about dark fiber, which is unused, unlit glass fiber that was laid in the ground years ago during the original dot-com boom, just waiting to be used. What happens when we run out of dark fiber and have to dig up the world all over again to keep the AI thinking?
We might hit a literal wall of dirt.
Something for you to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you're walking down the street and you see a massive wooden spool of fiber optic cable sitting on a corner, or workers digging a trench for telecom lines, take a closer look. You aren't just looking at internet plumbing anymore. You might be looking at the physical neural pathways of the next great AI. Until next time.